Excellencies, distinguished guests and speakers, I trust you've enjoyed lunch and are recharged for our afternoon sessions. It's now my pleasure to moderate our Malaysia panel. Anwar Ibrahim's Madani administration completed its second year in 2024, proving itself sufficiently cohesive and stable. In federal and state election cycles, 2024 was an off year, which most people, I suspect, greeted with relief. The 4 single-seat by-elections on the peninsula were evenly split, with Pakatan Harapan UMNO and Perikatan Nasional winning 2 apiece. The results suggest that the unity government has gained traction and the green wave has subsided. Of course, political drama persists, with the AP-UMNO tensions and PAS Bersatu unease occasionally surfacing, high-profile court cases raising eyebrows, and East Malaysia and PAS-governed states growing more assertive. Public expectations on both government and opposition have heightened. The Madani administration is mindful to present concrete plans and deliver tangible results. It launched the National Semiconductor Strategy and commenced the Singapore-Johor SEZ process, of which the agreement was just signed on Tuesday. The government delivered feel-good measures like the civil service pay rise, as well as tougher actions, notably subsidy rationalization. On institutional reforms, though, there is a more checkered record. It passed constitutional amendments on citizenship of foreign-born children of Malaysian mothers, among a few landmarks, but progress has been slow or absent on a host of other reforms. The PN opposition has held the government to account, but many are concerned that the coalition has continued to be focused on identity politics rather than substantive policies and has not offered a compelling alternative. How do we make sense of all that's happened, and what can we expect of 2025? How will Malaysia's resilience be tested, and what will be the outcomes? We're nearing the midpoint of the unity government's 5-year term. Conventional wisdom holds that the window for reforms is closing. This is the year to do the necessary but difficult before re-election interests supersede promised reforms, before popularity trumps principle. Amid these fluidities, 2 prospects are firm. Sabah will hold elections by year-end, and Malaysia has assumed the ASEAN chair. We are honored to have on this panel 2 seasoned political figures and thought leaders. Both will share our authoritative and hopefully candid insights on the state of Malaysia and this year's outlook. YB Wong Chen is in his 3rd parliamentary term in Selangor with PKR, the People's Justice Party, which helms the Pakatan-led unity government. He currently chairs both the Parliamentary Special Committee on International Relations and Trade and the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Political Financing. He has also served in various interparliamentary bodies. YB Dato Sri Saifuddin Abdullah is also a 3-term MP in Pahang. He brings experience from UMNO, PKR, and now Bersatu, and from his former cabinet roles, including Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Communications and Multimedia, and Deputy Minister of Higher Education. Please join me in welcoming them. In our chatting earlier, you reminded us that you are basketball teammates in the formidable parliament team that takes on other dignitaries and teams. And you are robust in body and mind, clearly, but we also hope to have some robust debate. And so now, without further ado, Wong Chen, please.
Thank you so much, Hwok-Aun. I want to start by thanking the hosts for giving me this opportunity to take part in this forum. A special mention to my friend Hwok-Aun, because he's from Subang, my constituent, but for giving his generous time to to structure my speech, actually. Like a school teacher that Hwok-Aun is. He advised me 4 minutes on political updates, 4 minutes on reform, 4 minutes on economic challenges, and 3 minutes on ASEAN issues. So I'll try to stick to that format. This is good because, as politicians, we tend to wing things and just, go with the flow, right? So let me just start the first 4 minutes on political updates. Just 3 days ago, on Monday, the 6th of January, there was the Najib house arrest addendum protest. For a very brief moment, I think we were a little bit worried, the government was a little bit worried, because the rally could potentially create a minor split. Not a big one, just a minor split in the unity government, because MIC and MCA responded that they will support the rally. Yeah? So there was a bit of a flutter there, and then the king issued a statement. Then the police urged the people not to join the protest, and then UMNO decided they will not join the rally. And then GPS came out with a statement and said that, let's give Anwar the full term. Then MCA did a U-turn very quickly, and MIC resorted to prayers instead of joining the protest. So on that day itself, the protest generated around 2,000 to 3,000 people. What was personally surprising to me was the low mobilization numbers from the opposition, in particular from PAS. PAS used to be part of us under Pakatan Rakyat. Normally, they can easily muster 10,000 people on the streets, right? And then in addition to everything else, the previous king, the Sultan of Pahang, issued a statement regarding the controversial addendum. Mahathir, of course, went on and talked a little bit about how the AP is the cause of everything bad. Ken Ming is here. Which is ironic because, during his tenure as Prime Minister, he depended heavily on DAP support. So just that quick description tells you that, that recent episode illustrates the complexities of Malaysian politics today. You have personalities like Dr. Mahathir still around. You have a large spectrum of political parties all jostling for power. And in addition now, in this addendum case in particular, you have two, the current king and the former king making statements. So you have the royal houses involved too. So it's true that it's never boring in Malaysia. The politics is really complicated. But I think we can learn one thing from the whole protest situation. There is a clear message is emerging that the people are really tired of politics in Malaysia. Yeah? Generally, people are worried about the economy, and it's, to its credit, my government has started delivering some macro results since Q1 of 2024. For the year 2024, we'll find out the actual numbers by February, I think, but IMF projects Malaysia GDP to grow by 4.8%. This is quite good, yeah? So the question then is, can the unity government survive a full term? The answer is yes, if it continues to grow the economy, because people are tired of politics, right? If you repeat 2024 for 2025, then we're looking good. And more importantly, this is a 5-year term. So if a government crosses the 3rd year, it is actually foolhardy for the opposition, with 2 years left before the election, to try to topple the government, because they got to explain, then they go into election cycle. So it's the safe zone is between now and a year from now. Yeah? And I also see that, I think January 6th is probably the last window for the opposition to grab power. So that's over. Thank God it's done, right? So I expect the opposition to try and come back to the negotiating table, talk about their constituency development fund, try to work together government so that we can, try to get our policies in place. Now, if the Prime Minister continues to run the country with a very pragmatic give and take approach and cement his personal ties, this is very important. Currently, the personal relationship between the Prime Minister and the top leaders, the unity government is going to be going to definitely have a full term. Okay. Now, the unity government has survived 2 years of external challenges. Hwok-Aun talked a little bit about Sabah, so let me address the Sabah issue. Those challenges are external from Saifuddin's side, right? The first test of the internal cohesion of Pakatan Harapan is actually coming from the Sabah election, where political parties in the unity government will be competing against each other, and this Sabah election is likely to take place in the 3rd or 4th quarter this year. So we'll see how that works, yeah? So despite the potential rift coming from the election contestation amongst partners in unity government, the results will actually not have any real impact in the federal side, because whoever wins at the state level, they will still work with the federal government. That is almost like the belief of Sabah-based politics, yeah? But what is interesting is if the government, the unity government, say the election is in July, can somehow work together by March and come out and say, okay, let's try to minimize, contestation, right? Then that could become a blueprint for the general election. Now, this is the interesting prospect. So therefore, if UMNO, PKR, GRS, GPS can sit down and say, okay, this area don't contest, this is my one, and they start working together, if Sabah does it, then we have a blueprint to ensure that we win a second term, okay? Now, on the second topic regarding slow progress of political reform, we have to start by doing a bit of mathematics. Unity government is composed of 81 members of parliament from Pakatan Harapan, 30 MPs from Barisan Nasional, 6 from GRS, 23 from GPS, 13 from pro-government. You can check Wikipedia on this. We have in total 153 MPs. There are 222 parliamentary seats in Malaysia. So collectively, the unity government has a 68% majority in parliament. This is a really big majority, 2/3. But as a subset of that majority, is the Pakatan MPs only make 36% of parliamentarians. Yeah? So Pakatan Harapan is 36%. It cannot pass any legislative reform. It can do administrative reform, of course, when the government has been doing so. But the big legislative reform, they can't do it at will. They need the partners who make up the other 32% to agree. So to be fair to our Pakatan partners, who are non-Pakatan partners, their MPs were elected into office with their own promises and policies. Most of them were actually very different from the reformasi of Pakatan. So you can't expect them to say, yes, we agree to reform. Yeah? The fear back then, and I think still is that if Pakatan Harapan pushes for legislative reforms that the other partners do not agree to, they may vote against it, and that will embarrass the government, of course. But in the nightmare scenario, they get so fed up and they just walk out, then the government will topple. Yeah? This is not an excuse for not reforming, but it is the real political situation or real politics in the unity government today. Inversely, our Pakatan supporters whom we promise reforms are now grumbling a lot. You can read this on the social media. KJ is here. He's not, I don't know whether it's my supporter or not, but the grumbles are real. He can testify to that. Some are just plain angry. In order for us to have a fighting chance to be re-elected during the next 2.5 years, Pakatan will need to convince their partners, the UMNO guys, to help them to deliver some of these reforms. Yeah? So that we can placate the reformasi supporters and energize them. But this is really a political tight wire act, right? It's really difficult. Math aside, there is also an issue about basic human relationship. Imagine if you and your neighbors have been viciously quarreling with each other over 25 years. Then your son decides to marry the neighbor's daughter. You are now forced to form a so-called unity family. How long do you think you need to forgive and forget and warm up and be friends with your neighbors, right? That's the same situation for us. For us MPs in Parliament, I can speak for myself at least. In the 2 years since, I've actually become much closer to my colleagues from UMNO and Barisan Nasional. So much so that we start playing sports together, and after I go eat nasi lemak a bit, hang out. But we haven't reached the stage where I'm inviting a member of Parliament from UMNO to my house to meet my spouse, have dinner. We're not going on a family holiday anytime soon, right? But what we have for once, after 2 years, is a working relationship. And hopefully that working relationship also will enable us to carry out some of the reforms. So the next question is, how many of these reforms can we do? Let's say Pakatan Harapan has 20 reforms. I think achieving about 5 or 25% is probably just right. Something definitely achievable. If we push harder, we may get 10 out of 20 or 50%. But to expect to deliver 20 out of 20, no way. It's just not possible. Yeah? But this is where we need to get our supporters to understand their expectations. So behavioral science tells us very clearly, we need to manage these expectations quickly and with better and clearer communication. Otherwise, we do what we want, but we do late, we're going to be punished as well. Now, what are the major reforms that we need to do? Number one, we need to do the Parliamentary Services Act to basically take away the powers of the government or of the executive over Parliament. So get Parliament's independence, get a better budget so that we can actually do our job to check the executive powers. Executive powers in Malaysia, due to decades of policy making or laws, are extreme by any measure. Yeah? Discretionary power is right across the board, from appointment to key judicial bodies to MECC. All those are in the hands of the Prime Minister. So we need an active Parliament, empowered under Parliamentary Services Act, to let us do our job to keep our government honest. That's important. Second thing, of course, we need to fight corruption. This is the biggest problem in Malaysia. We need a whole new set of anti-corruption law, from political financing, which I chair, to whistleblowing, to asset declaration, and seizure of unexplained wealth. Yeah. So the next question you might ask is, can we actually deliver this thing? As I said, after 2 years, Friendship is not bad. Relationship amongst cabinet members is better, of course. So we do have that ability to do so. But the most important element coming in is many backbenchers like myself, we have given our government a 2-year timeline to do things and not to interfere too much and not to attack them openly. Right? Now that 2 years passed, we think that the government is comfortable, the unity is solid. Then the backbenchers like us who are very focused on reform issue, we will start pushing the reform agenda. I have issued 5, 6 press statements since December when the 2-year timeline was out. And I think we need to do this because that's the only way we can remind the government that our own MPs need this. Yeah? So I think that's going to start. That will help us to go a bit further. Now, like most MPs in Malaysia, where we are multi-party, multicultural, multi-religious Malaysia, we have to always take a very pragmatic approach to any lawmaking that we do. So if they want to propose a law, and the law is watered down to make way for GPS, GRS, Barisan Nasional to accept, we should do it. I'm absolutely certain we have to do this because lawmaking in Malaysia is not lawmaking in Norway, where everybody is like, 6'4", blonde, blue-eyed people. Lawmaking in Malaysia has to deal with, Indians, Malay, Chinese, Kadazan, Iban. The law is always an organic process. You get it done first, then you look at the feedback from all the constituents, all the different races, and then you make, in the second, third year, make amendments to it, and then push it. Organic lawmaking is the only way to do things in Malaysia. Yeah? Now, as a politician, I also tell you one more factor why I really strongly believe the Prime Minister will carry out the reforms he needs to do. Because, for most of us, when we reach a certain age, and the Prime Minister is 77 years old, it becomes a question not of power per se, but it becomes a question of legacy. Yeah? Anwar's legacy is tied to reforms. For 25 years since the sacking from UMNO, he's been talking about the same subject matter. So therefore, to secure his own personal legacy, he will need to do this. The question is, when? Is it going to be this year, 2025, in the 3rd year, or is it going to wait until 2026 in the 4th year? Yeah, I have 2 minutes left. I got 2 more topics to go, so I'm just going to wing it. Okay, okay. Let me just quickly talk about the economy. The Malaysian economy is doing well in big macro numbers. On the ground, not so much. Cost of food is still high. We have policies to cut subsidies to make the government into a stronger fiscal position. That is full of, landmines. Okay, you cut subsidies too fast, people get too angry, you lose political will. Yeah. So, but overall, we have been very good in attracting FDIs coming from the tech industry and also from data centers. What we need to do to keep this going is to basically revamp our energy policy to make sure that we can supply enough renewable energy. Because all these companies need to meet RE100 by 2030. So we do that, then we can keep these data centers and the tech company happy. And that also we need to revamp our education system to create more STEM graduates and keep them here in Malaysia rather than, Singapore taking them away. So we need to also look at meritocracy. We also need to look at the basic issue of wage increase. Yeah? But the other economic sector that is growing very well is the rare earth elements. Malaysia have a deposit of about $300 billion US. We need to tap into that so that we can go into the high-tech manufacturing of green products, batteries, windmill turbines, things like that. Quickly, ASEAN. 2 things. One, we are interested in finding a solution for the Myanmar civil war. I think that's something that we are very interested in pushing for because we have this troika coming up, which is Malaysia, Singapore, then Philippines. All 3 countries are democratic, yeah, and they're not neighbors with Myanmar, so there's no local politics involved. Then we can take a holistic position, take a bit further away, and more importantly, if the war comes to an end, all these democratic countries, the 3 of us, can actually guide Myanmar to get a more federal democratic system. Yeah? And last one, climate change. I think this is the only area where ASEAN can do a lot. ASEAN's problem is always rich country like Singapore, then you got Laos, which is still developing. Laos has hydropower, they have forests. Singapore is the trading of the credit trading system. Let's work together. This is only one area where the economic disparity between nations within ASEAN, you can actually benefit all sides. And then the rest of us will pile in and try and do this. The aim is to get the carbon trading unified and harmonized so that ASEAN can actually produce something of value. Instead of, holding hands and sing some songs and whatever, right? We need to have very specific result. And you can't do it anywhere else because all of us are competing. We compete against Thailand on the automobile industry, right? Indonesian workers cannot work in Singapore without a permit. We are nowhere near the European Union except in the climate area. Yeah, on that point, thank you so much. Thanks, thank you.
Thank you very much, Wong Chen. Sorry to rush us along, but time is of essence. And you've given us, I think, a lot to reflect on and I guess to pose some questions. I just want to make one note here. You heard it here. Backbenchers will push for reform and make a lot more noise this year. Now, over to you, Saifuddin.
Okay. Yep, go ahead. All right. Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon. Let me start by thanking ISEAS for inviting me, regardless which party I represent. And thank you for inviting me for this session. Beginning the general election 13 and continued to general election 14, and this was starting about 2013, you have observed some changes in the way political parties in Malaysia form coalitions. But what is even more important is that the general public has started seriously thinking about the kind of Malaysia that we want, a better Malaysia for all, with certain criteria and characteristics. This is the undercurrent that started somewhere 2013 or maybe 1 or 2 years before. And there is a general understanding among many Malaysians that we can do better than this. We need to reset what used to work before. We need to improve certain things. We need to innovate or introduce new ways of doing things, and we need to prevent from going down the drain, from decay, if you like. What is the attitude of government then? In the past, it has always been, the mantra has always been change within continuity. PN government, before that was PH government, before that was Barisan National Government. Change within continuity. What is the current government trying to do? Or more specifically, the Prime Minister? I think he suffers from what I would consider the terpaling syndrome. I'm the best syndrome. He is trying too hard to be the best Prime Minister. My advice to him is you are already Prime Minister. You don't have to prove whether you're going to be the best. The problem with terpaling, I'm the best, is that you sometimes forget what other people, you deny what other people has done in the past. And that, I think, is his biggest problem. You invited people from two opposing sides, right? Yeah. What is the short-term political challenge? Yes, Sabah election, 2025, followed by Sarawak election, 2026, and then there is the Malacca election, and the general election is supposed to be in 2027, November. The other short-term challenge, even though this may not take place, is the Parliamentary and State Assembly delimitation exercise. The big debate, number one, are we going to increase the number of parliamentary seats? Number two, is Sabah and Sarawak going to get what they are asking for? That is, Sabah and Sarawak will get 35% of all of the seats. Definitely, if that is going to be the cost, then you will have to add the number from the current 222, but not sure whether this will take place. But The next question is, can the current government survive the whole term? I was then the Chief Secretary of Pakatan Harapan when we formed the government in 2018. I was one of those few who asked this question then in one of our retreats. At that time, my question was, can we, with the support of less than 35% of the Malay majority, sustain our leadership as government? The current unity government is supported by 10% of the majority of the population, whereas we in the Perikatan Nasional, in the opposition, is supported by 90% of the majority of the population. Now, this is not racial politics, Kiang Meng, you know where I'm coming from. It's just pure mathematics. I'm talking about the undercurrent. Wong Chen alluded to the addendum. He said 6 January is probably the last chance, but I thought that is just the beginning of the last chance. Now, what are the reform prospects under the current government? There are about a dozen institutional reforms that people believe have to be executed. People here, mainly the reformists, including from PKR, from DAP, a few of us probably from Bersatu, from PAS, or people like Kari Jamaluddin from UMNO those days. Those days. Yeah, we are all basketballers, yeah. All the four. I don't know, ISEAS, you did your homework. So you don't get shouting match here. I won't go into the detail, but some of the reforms, like the reenacting of the Parliamentary Services Act, political financing on Constituency Development Fund Act and things like that, do not enjoy the kind of sense of urgency that is expected from Prime Minister Anwar. There are talks, there are initiatives, but the sense of urgency doesn't seem to be there. Whereas he has been talking about it. Or, yes, I understand the issues faced by PH in the unity government, but the sense of urgency doesn't seem to be there. And what about the other reforms? There are not much of a discussion. Now, that is the unfortunate thing that is happening now from a reformist Prime Minister. And what about the promises versus actions on the promises? He promised the price of diesel will go down. The price of diesel has come up. Latest is electricity tariff hike. The toll fee is still there. And the latest amendment to the Communication and Multimedia Act is really something that we don't expect from a reformist government or a reformist-led, a government led by a reformist prime minister. And there is this story about the 3R. You cannot discuss 3R, race, religion, and rulers. We never had this problem in the past. Of course, there are people who get into trouble because they created their own trouble, but there is no real sanction coming from the authority. Don't speak on 3R. And then, what about some projects, economic business projects? The leasing of helicopters from a company who loaned Anwar helicopters during the last general election. What about U-Mobile winning the contract for the second 5G network? And what about the Prime Minister's statement criticizing earlier persecutions that to him are deemed flawed and hasty? What happened to Teo Beng Hock homicide decision by the Court of Appeal? There don't seem to be any follow-up in terms of investigation. To people like us, I think the Prime Minister is full of vengeance. Look at what is happening or what used to happen to the late Allahyarham Tun Daim, and the RCI on Mahathir. So the question is, where is Anwar the reformer, and where is Anwar the Muslim Democrat? In fact, some of us are saying he is becoming the very thing that he was fighting against. The Madani government, in terms of economy, yes, I agree with Wong Chen. Cost of living is the biggest problem. But in his first speech in Parliament, he said he will form a committee, and he gave the committee 2 weeks to come back and come up with the formulas to solve the problem related to cost of living. We haven't heard anything. And in his latest budget speech, he suddenly spoke about not the top 20, but now the top 15. And then after a few days after that, Rafizi came up with something else. And then he said, no, it's not T15, it's T10. So some people are saying, is this T15, T10, or Tipu? What if Perikatan Nasional become government before the end of the term? For economic policy, we have a policy ready. It is called the Shared Prosperity Vision, which was part of the 12th Malaysia Plan. We have a concrete proposal on education reform, even though a lot more has to be done. I believe the Perikatan Nasional is now back to the drawing board. I expect the shadow cabinet to be working better from now on, and we will be coming up with more policies or policy alternative. What about ASEAN chairmanship? One thing good about Anwar is that I don't think he will propose to change the name of the South China Sea. You don't get the joke, yeah. But he has to be more measured as the Prime Minister of Malaysia, and more so as Chairman of ASEAN. He has to be more measured in both his words and actions. I have no problem with Malaysia joining the BRICS, but I have a problem when the Prime Minister announced that Malaysia wants to be a member of BRICS just a few days before the Premier of China come visiting Kuala Lumpur. Come on, don't go that low. You must have certain style in announcing your national policy. The issue of BlackRock, for those who follow, Malaysia Airport Holding Berhad is in the process of selling some of its good portion of its shares to BlackRock, and you know BlackRock is closely associated with, or directly or indirectly with Israel, go against his so passionate stand on Palestine. And if you are Prime Minister, or if you are head of government, you don't declare your colleague who somehow cannot come for your meeting that your colleague demam or having fever. You don't do that. There is a big no in diplomacy. Yeah. What would be the focus if I were to propose to Anwar? There will be two. Number one, strengthening intra-ASEAN trade. And if I can echo Rebecca's statement, we really have to look at the 3 tiers. I think some of the things that we are doing, and we're busy doing like how many thousand meetings every year when someone chairs. Digital economy is the big thing. But unfortunately, I think ASEAN has done very little when it comes to digital economy. We talk about digital connectivity. Yes, it is important, but the economic side of this digital thing has to be given a lot of priority. And I also agree with Rebecca. ASEAN member states have a big, huge amount of informal economies. And I think we really need to migrate from, or help them, or facilitate our members, our inhabitants in the ASEAN region from informal economy to formal economy. The second would be solving the Myanmar crisis. UNWRA has the opportunity to help ASEAN change the understanding and narrative on what is actually happening in Myanmar. ASEAN member states will not change their perception on Myanmar until and unless they understand what is really happening. Now, what is really happening? The main crux of the matter is that the junta is losing and the people are winning. That would be the first start. Until and unless ASEAN member states understand that the people are winning and the junta is losing, they're not going to change their non-interference policy, even though I used to propose non-indifference as an alternative approach towards the crisis in Myanmar. UNWRA should start and be the first ASEAN. He wants to be the terpaling, so he has an opportunity to be the first ASEAN chair to engage the NUG, the NUCC, and the people stakeholders, and offer a more creative way of implementing the 5-point consensus. I'm trying to be very diplomatic because Noli knows that I believe the 5-point consensus has failed, but never mind. Let's be more diplomatic, be more creative and aggressive in actually executing some kind of a transition, because the people are winning and the junta is losing. And you have to start with engaging the NUG and the NUCC. So if he can do that, then he could probably end up by becoming probably one of the best, if not the best, ASEAN chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saifuddin. Thank you for presenting the contrasting view from the Perikatan opposition side, and I think also to have a bipartisan consensus on the importance of resolving the Myanmar issues or to give attention to that while Malaysia is holding the ASEAN chair this year. So we'll proceed to a time of Q&A. May I encourage you to step up to the microphones? They will help me to see and raise your hands while you're composing, because I have my question too, but then we can organize it and try to get a good sampling across the room. So I'm seeing you there, but I think with the theme of reform, let me just follow up with this question. And I think Wong Chen, yes, you explained to us, and we've heard that a lot, coalition government, the complexities, not everybody's on board. But can you address the concerns, which you are alluding to, but go peel away the layers a bit more about what's happening within Pakatan Harapan, addressing the question, the concerns that the resolve is not there. Pakatan has tasted power, and you will go again, you advocate reforms, democracy, against those kind of tools of power, and now you tasted the tools of power and you want to keep them. So give us, where do you point to give assurance that the commitment and the resolve is still there? To Saifuddin, you had alluded to, I think, that the opposition, right, is not really being as effective as it could be when you said that, the shadow cabinet, your hopes for it to be more effective. And I think that is a widely shared concern. And I think you have also pointed out that, there's still some kind of thought, right, in your minds about taking power still. I mean, and you said that people don't want the politicking. So, why can't Perikatan just move on with building its bases to be an effective opposition? Is there lack of capacity? Is there a lack of incentive? The leadership still wants to take power. You could build your bases and focus on being that loyal and effective opposition, please.
Okay, yeah, I'm still absolutely sure that the Prime Minister is on board for reform, because he keeps talking about it. I mean, as recent as probably 2-3 weeks ago, he gave a speech that he's fully committed to fight corruption. Yeah? And we accept that, and we counter-propose that he has to do an asset declaration. And the government has come to Parliament to say, for instance, in May, you can check the Hansards, they did say they are going to propose an asset declaration better than the Pakatan government of Dr. Mahathir in 2018. So all these sound bites are still there. Again, it's a question of timing, right? And to me, the biggest driver, which I emphasized earlier, is the Prime Minister's legacy. He cannot go down in history as a reformist who has suffered, human rights abuses, sent to jail. He just cannot let it down that his first term in government, if he gets a second term, right, he did not deliver any reform whatsoever. So it's that legacy that will drive it. And his constant reminding that he wants to tackle corruption. And we as backbenchers, we're not part of the government per se, not in the cabinet. We accept that and we remind him, asset declaration is important. Yeah? Auditing of the asset declaration, unexplained wealth order. All those are what we wrote in our policy. So I think he's still there. He's still talking about it. It's not like he's forgotten completely, right? Then the question is all about timing. And also, he must realize that, we're riding on this high of economic growth. For it to be constant, for it to continue to grow, he needs to carry out governance reform, because governance itself, improving governance, gives you a democracy dividend that we need. So ultimately, you can be skeptical, you can say, oh yeah, Wong Chen is just talking about this kind of thing, but what is the real purpose of politicians? Why are we here in government? To get re-elected, to continue that policy making. So I can tell you this year, he'll look carefully at the numbers, the demographics, and he'll see, do I really need to carry out reform now, or can I wait another year? Right? If the economy is doing well, they'll probably say, okay, hold back a bit, right? But if it's not doing so well, we don't know under Trump, all of us are a bit worried, then he will push harder for reform. I truly believe this. Yeah? Thank you.
Well, Malaysian politician has a new hobby. We like to change government. In the last term, we changed the government 3 times. Not bad, for a young democracy. Now, yes, we are committed to become and to behave and to act like a constructive opposition. We will, of course, wait for the next GE, but if there is an opportunity, and if the problem is so big and things don't seem to work, then you can't blame us if there were to be some kind of move to take over the government before the term expire. But what is even more important, I believe, is that the Perikatan Nasional on our side, as I said earlier, we have to be more cohesive in the way we do things. One of the problems with Malaysian politics, and this is not limited only to Perikatan Nasional and what have you, is that our politics is too personality-oriented. It's not really policy-oriented. I used to say, if you were to put the Constitution of PAS and the Constitution of UMNO and now Bersatu side by side, delete the name of the party and call 10 members of each party and select and decide which is your constitution. It's like choosing between Pepsi Cola and Coca-Cola. Most people may not know which is their own constitution. But our biggest challenge is really presenting ourselves as a more centrist coalition come the next general election. We understand that there are some people in Malaysia, especially non-Muslims, and I understand that, we understand that perfectly, who may have certain questions in some of the things that some of our leaders in our coalition are talking about or discussing. So we have to be very careful, and I hope that come GE16, we will be able to move more to the center. I'm not saying we are far right, I'm not saying we are a rightist coalition, but all I'm trying to say is the best thing that can happen to Malaysia in the next general election is we fight at the center.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, this is the moderator's dream. There's so many questions. We'll do alternating from right, left, with Sharon first. And while she's asking, could we have a roving mic here? And then we'll go back there for 4 questions in the first round. Oh, you have the question mic already. Okay, please go ahead.
All right.
Sharon next.
Sharon, do you want to go first? All right. My name is Nolene Hazer, and I used to be the former Special Envoy of the United Nations for Myanmar, and also the former UN Under-Secretary General. I just wanted to pick up on the issue of Malaysia's chairing of ASEAN, but to put it in a slightly more global context, because we are living in a very unbalanced world, and today there are 59 countries that are caught in conflict. And out of that, what we have witnessed that have created this unbalanced world is the breaking, not just of the rule of law, but the rule of war, where civilians are being attacked and all civilians' infrastructure have been destroyed, and food security is used as a weapon of war, and so on, not even referring to sexual violence. Now, together with that, according to the data that I have, out of the 59 countries, if you look at just the 20 countries that are affected by conflict extremely, poverty has increased in those countries by 85% since the mid-2000s, right? Now, out of that, Myanmar is number 3 of the worst affected country in the globe, after Sudan and after the Palestinian territories. Now, what is it that Malaysia can do that will make a difference to moving the agenda, but also in making sure that the rule of law and the rule of war are being are being respected? And I think that there are 3 things if we can really make the 5-point consensus work. One is that the first thing is to reduce the violence, but it's too broad. But can we at least, under Myanmar's, under your chairing of ASEAN, to ensure that Myanmar stop the burning and destruction of civilian infrastructure and attack, and increase the protection on civilians? So that is something that's very concrete, based on what can be done in a 5-point consensus. Increasingly, it's not just the engagement of NUG or NUCC and so on. The ethnic armed organizations control more than 60% of the country at this particular stage. And most of the people who need humanitarian aid happen to be in their areas. And so how would you increase the second point of the consensus, which is to improve humanitarian aid to everyone in need? And finally, the third point is how do you involve a more inclusive engagement at least in one area where there is at least a common use of word, i.e. the Federal Democratic Union, but everybody meaning different things. So how could Malaysia, because you have a federal system, bring deeper understanding to that? Just if you could answer that.
Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Sharon from the ASEAN Studies Center. Thank you very much for your thoughts. My question is also relating to Myanmar. I think we here in ASEAN agree that ASEAN's peace project for the last 50 years has been very successful. And actually one of the biggest challenges to the continuation of the peace project is the issue of Myanmar that's testing ASEAN's unity. But as observers, we see that ASEAN does not have a common position on Myanmar. There are so many issues that Nolene has highlighted, and one of the issues that's going to come up very soon is actually the legitimacy of certain actors within Myanmar. How can we move towards, a more liberal understanding of who might be the stakeholders that are of importance in the country? How can we move away from the neighborhood policy that MP Wong Chen has talked about? Because the neighborhood policy has been driving the issue in the last 2 to 3 years. So the question is, how will Malaysia manage to create enabling conditions to implement the 5-point consensus, to ensure that the Myanmar-led, Myanmar-owned process, which has now become a code word for saying that, we don't want to do anything, just let it be Myanmar-led and Myanmar-owned. How can we ensure that this process is really true to the spirit? And the last question is, what value add do you think PM Anwar's personal advisors, we read in the press that former Prime Minister Thaksin, former foreign ministers George Yeo and Ibu Retno, what do you think the value add they can bring to this issue of Myanmar? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over here, Wakit, yes.
Thank you. I'm Wakit from CNA. My question is based on what Mr. Wong Chen said earlier, not in the exact words, but when the Myanmar civil war is ended, countries like Singapore and Malaysia can guide the country back to democracy. In fact, right now, the junta is pushing for elections. However, elections is not part of the 5-point consensus. So how can ASEAN reconcile these two very different positions? And on a more practical question, how should ASEAN handle a post-election Myanmar, especially if it has not rolled out a 5-point consensus? Should it, because of democracy, invite Myanmar back? And if so, what credibility does ASEAN have? Thank you very much.
We'll take one more. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Tiffany from the London School of Economics. I just wanted to ask, do you think that fundamentalism is on the rise in Malaysia, and are you concerned about this, especially with regards to inter-ethnic relations? And if you are concerned, what do you think Malaysia should do about it? Thank you.
I'll repeat it. Okay, thank you so much for the questions. Clearly, Myanmar is an issue that resonates, and we won't be able to do justice to all the questions and points that were raised. But I'll ask Wong Chen to respond to the set of Myanmar questions, and then is fundamentalism on the rise in Malaysia? What will Malaysia do? That will be for Saifuddin.
Okay, thank you for the 3 questions in Myanmar. The most important thing we need to understand is the 3 most important countries in Myanmar civil conflict is Thailand, number 1, because it's the big neighbor. That's where the humanitarian work has to go through. So the Prime Minister has made approach to the new Prime Minister of Thailand, and Thaksin also is a special advisor. We hope that he can put some influence into there and get Thaksin to talk a little bit more to the junta as a bridge, and see whether we can find a middle ground somewhere. The other 2 countries, of course, China and Russia. Russia, in terms of what we understand, is the supply of military weapons to the junta is there. So Malaysia finds itself in a unique position where we are friends with China very close, and the Prime Minister, for whatever reasons he's pursuing, has become friends of Putin as well. So if we do get the Ukrainian issue being resolved, and I spoke to the Chinese envoy on this issue in particular, then the attention will focus now to Chinese borders, right? So China itself would require a settlement of its border with Myanmar. So they too will be motivated to try and find a peaceful resolution. So I think, at best, my Prime Minister's personal relationship with Xi Jinping, Putin, and also now with Thaksin and the Prime Minister of Thailand, we hope that he will use his charm and his capacity to try to win them over to find a middle ground. Yeah. Now, for the elections, I think, I don't speak for the government because I'm part of the backbench. We are not going to recognize this because it's just not possible to recognize any election when 60% of the land is controlled by rebels, or by the opposition. So that's a no-go area. I think in Indonesia and us, and Malaysia in particular, and Singapore, we have a very strong position on this. So I don't think there'll be any whitewashing or legitimacy for the junta in the coming days. Yeah. As for the personal advisor, I already mentioned a bit about Thaksin, but I think Hun Sen also can play some role because Hun Sen do have some ties with them. How do we move on from that to use these actors? They had a position which they were kind of like soft on the junta. Can we get these actors to now be, peacemakers on behalf of Malaysia? But the Troika thing is very important. If we do get an end of the war, whether by peaceful means or by, all out, we are ready, Malaysia's ready for federal system. Singapore has a democratic system, and more importantly, Philippines, because I think this war may take another 2 years to resolve. But if we start it today in Malaysia, we set the agenda, we have 3 years to sort it out. Yeah? And all 3 are democratic countries. It's very important that we push that message across. Thank you.
Okay, is fundamentalism on the rise in Malaysia, depending on how you look at it? If you listen to Lim Kit Siang, he will say, beware of the green
wave.
The green wave. Okay. That's propaganda. But if you're worried about PAS leading some of the states, that's government and that's politics. You know, in 2013, I lost my constituency in Temerloh to a PAS candidate. Why? Because all the 6 Chinese-dominated localities voted for PAS and not for me. So the issue of fundamentalism in Malaysia is not that simple. Are we not worried at all? Yeah, there are reasons to be worried, yeah, but not in the sense just because PAS wins so many seats, therefore there is a rise in fundamentalism.
Okay, we'll take a final round, and over with Tim Sak first this way, and then Ken Ming and back there. We'll go around. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Please be very brief.
Yeah. I'm from Thailand. I belong to the Thailand study program of ISEAS. I want to ask about Prime Minister Anwar wanting to make former Thailand Prime Minister Thaksin as his personal advisor to the ASEAN chair. Well, since the second speaker also mentioned the role of the ASEAN chair of the Prime Minister, maybe we can hear from him also why he wants to make Thaksin his personal advisor on ASEAN affairs. Since Thaksin himself is a corruption convict under the Thai law, he cannot hold any political position in Thai government, and he is not allowed to even travel overseas without court permission. So it's a big surprise to me that Prime Minister Anwar wants to make Thaksin his personal advisor.
Thank you very much. Why Thaksin? Alvin, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Alvin. I teach Malaysian politics at the National University of Singapore. My question is for YB Saifuddin Abdullah. I just wanted to pick up a point that you mentioned just now, that Perikatan Nasional is prepared to wait for the next general election, but if there's some opportunity that it is potentially willing to make some moves to change government. Now, some observers would say that this move to make a change in government, a backdoor government, is anti-democratic, that you did not win elections. That the proper thing to do if an incumbent's popularity decreases is to call for new elections, and is the democratic thing to do to have new elections if the incumbent calls for it, and then to win a mandate from those elections. So do you think that the Perikatan Nasional wanting to form a backdoor government, even currently, what would you say to those who say that it's an anti-democratic thing to do?
Thank you very much, Ken Ming.
Yeah, quick clarification point, Dato Saifuddin. PH together with UMNO probably has about 30 to 40% of the Malay vote and not just 10%. Yeah. My 2 questions have to do with succession planning, one for Wong Chen, one for Saifuddin. Sorry, my name is Ken Ming. I used to be colleagues with the 2 gentlemen there. To Wong Chen.
I thought we are still friends.
Yes, we're still friends. Yeah. Good friends, yes. But yeah, me and Kyrie, we are podcasters now, no longer in Parliament. Wong Chen, YB Wong Chen, given the fact that it's been publicly reported that Dato' Anwar Ibrahim has approached Tengku Zafrul, the MITI minister, to want to entice him to join PKR, is that an indication of perhaps Dato' Anwar's own failure of confidence in terms of succession planning within your own party, especially with the party elections coming up soon? And then for Dato' Saifuddin, given the fact that now PAS are proposing a couple of leaders within their own ranks, the Kedah Menteri Besar as well as the Terengganu Menteri Besar, to possibly take over the leadership of Perikatan Nasional, does that mean that your coalition partners are also losing confidence in the leadership of former Prime Minister and current Perikatan Nasional Chairman, Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin? Thank you.
Okay, lastly, very briefly. Yep.
Andrew Fennell, Citibank. Could you please comment on the prospects for budgetary reform? There's been some very modest measures in the form of subsidy rationalization, but there have not been any meaningful measures to raise Malaysia's revenue to GDP ratio. Any comments in this regard?
you very much. Maybe you can get Saifuddin to address the questions to him first about backdoor government is anti-democratic, and then succession.
I didn't ask Anwar why he appoints Thaksin as his personal advisor, informal. ASEAN informal advisor, whatever. The last time I checked, no former chair of ASEAN have that kind of groupings. So I don't really know what would be the value of having Thaksin, but I can understand why if Ibu Retno will be one of the advisors, that is to follow through some of the things that Indonesia did very well when they were chair of ASEAN, when it comes to trying to solve the Myanmar crisis. So probably looking at continuity from the 150 plus engagements that Jakarta have had with all of the stakeholders from Myanmar. Now, you see, there are so many definitions about democracy, and you can always argue that every time there is a change of government, you must, and you underline the word must, capital letter, bold, that you must have election. By all means, if it is practical. I'm not saying that that is not the best way, but who is saying that a change of government midterm is totally undemocratic? Now, the Perikatan Nasional is intact in terms of its unity. Muhyiddin is still the chair, and the appointment of the Secretary General and what have you is still the prerogative of the chairman, which is Tan Sri Muhyiddin. Yes, PAS may be thinking of having a candidate for Prime Minister, but we have yet to come to it, Kiameng. Our first priority is bring down Anwar, then we decide who becomes Prime Minister.
Okay. Yeah. Regarding the question from the Thai gentleman, regarding Payton Tong Tan, sorry, the Prime Minister. The assumption is, Thailand is very important as a neighbor, but more important for the Myanmar conflict. So perhaps the Prime Minister needs to approach the Prime Minister, who is relatively young. And I mean, there's a general consensus that, the father does have a lot of influence over her. So maybe this is the reason why. But the Prime Minister have never explained this to even party members like us. And I'm chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, right? So we don't really know. We just assume that's to go to the PM of Thailand through the father. Second, the question from Ken Ming regarding Zafro. I think they have a very good relationship. I see the Prime Minister with Zafro having very good ties, and it's an open secret that Zafro is also has issues in UMNO, right? But the timing was wrong, obviously, because if Zafro would have left UMNO, I don't think he can become a minister anymore because there's an UMNO quota for ministers. So it was all a question of timing. Some people say that you want to bring him in early in January or December so that he can contest in the party election in June. I don't think that's the case. I don't think it's really a question of succession. Yeah, I think they have a personal good relationship, and the news leaked out for whatever reason. We're not sure how it leaked out also. And then the Prime Minister put in the defensive position to explain. Yeah. Last issue regarding revenue to GDP, increasing that. Of course, we're very worried. In Malaysia, most of this revenue comes from income tax. It comes from excise duty. It comes from dividend from Petronas. It also comes from GLIC's performance. So while the government is committed to some form of subsidy rationalization, because we spend about 70 billion a year on subsidies alone, and then we tried it out in the oil revenue for diesel, we found out the smuggling is about 30%. So there are a lot of money that you can save if we do full rationalization of the subsidies. because the so-called smuggling and corruption issue is about 30%, and 30% of 70 billion is a lot of money, right? So the second issue about revenue, of course, if you grow the economy, the revenue will increase. But more importantly for Petronas, and I've said this many times, some of us agree, some of us don't, I think we really do need to list Petronas like what the Norwegian have done, so that we can see the, like a clear, transparent position. How are the contracts in Petronas done? Petronas contributes about 30, 40 billion a year to the government. Can it contribute 60 billion, 70 billion? That is a revenue source. And listing it is probably the best way to do it, right? The Norwegian have done it, and I think we should follow that model relatively. Okay? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for fielding all the questions. Now we circle back to Madani, which is the Malay translation for SCRIPT, which stands for Sustainability, Compassion, Respect, Innovation, Prosperity, Trust. In the Malaysian spirit of indulgent acronyms, let me conclude with an ROF-inspired rendition of Madani. And based on what we have heard on this panel discussion, Malaysia can look forward to a 2025 that is momentous, adaptive, dynamic, anything can happen, novel, illuminating. With that, let's put our hands together to thank Wong Chen and Saifuddin Abdullah. Thank you for your questions.